Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment meeting for Friday, April 12th. Time is now 9 o'clock, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. And before I begin, I'd like to ask if anybody has their cell phone nearby, please put it, or any other device you may have, on silent mode. And I'd also like to point out that the proceedings this morning are being recorded and will be live streamed on the township website. So in accordance with that, we have microphones throughout the room. And I would just like to let you know there's one microphone that's back in the gallery area that does pick up the conversations that are back there. And those conversations do become a matter of record, or part of the record for the meeting. And I would ask, if you do require a side conversation, please make use of the lobby that's just out here. Just step outside the door and you're fine, and you're quite welcome to come and go as you please. So should not be an issue there. I would also say, for those people who are applicants or agents or members of the public that wish to comment on any applications, we have two microphones set up in the two tables in front. I would ask you that you come forward. There's a little button that you press and the light will come on. State your name and address for the record, and that way we'll be able to record your conversation clearly. This morning, for this morning's meeting, we have one consent application and 6 minor variance applications. I'll briefly summarize the procedure that will be utilized during the meeting. First of all, our Secretary-Treasurer will inform us as to who, how, and when notification of these meetings were circulated. Next, each of the applications will be considered individually. The planning staff will advise as to the purpose and effect of the application and provide any additional information that is relevant. The Secretary-Treasurer will summarize any correspondence that we've received in regard to those applications. And the applicant will be given an opportunity to speak to the application, as well as any member of the public. And again, if you'd step up to the mic for that. Following that, we'll close the public session and bring the proceedings into the Committee of Adjustment. And if there's any questions required from that point, please wait to be recognized by the chair before you step forward. The minor variance applications being considered this morning are, first of all, the consent is B 1902 for 6198 Go Home Lake Shore. Number 2 is A 18-46 for 1200 Haskets Road. Number 3 is A 1905 for 2 Island 1860 Georgian Bay Shore. Number 4 is A 1906 for 58 Ravine Way. A 1908 is 972 Haskets Drive. Number 6 is A 1906 for 742 Kings Farms Road. And number 7 is A 1910 for 165 Big Rock Road. I would ask the members of the committee, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move to our Secretary-Treasurer.
Thank you, Chair. Notice of each of the applications was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, 500 meters, or 800 meters, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 20 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and a key map showing the location of the property. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act 1990.
Thank you. Our first application is a consent application, B1902 for 6198 Go Home Lake Shore. To the planner, please.
Good morning. So the consent application before you today is to propose a lot boundary adjustment for 6198 Go Home Lake Shore. So the severed lands is comprised of 1,750 square meters, or 0.4 acres, and is proposed to be added to the benefiting lands, bringing the total lot area to 5,861 square meters, or 1.4 acres. And the retained lot will have a lot area of 10,235.4 square meters, or about 2.5 acres. So this application may look familiar to some of you. So there was a consent application brought forward and approved in December of 2017. So under section 53 sub 41 of the Planning Act, all conditions must be fulfilled within 1 year of the date of sending of the notice, or a consent application is deemed refused. So this consent application did not complete all of the conditions outlined, and it has since lapsed. So the applicant is bringing the application forward again. No changes have been made to the original application since they were originally heard. Just to give you an overview of the subject lands. So the subject property here is the retained lands, and the land that will be getting the lot addition is the lands to the north here. So the property is zoned shoreline residential type 1, and they are on Go Home Lake. Just to give you an overview of the retained, severed, and benefiting lands. So you can see the retained land outlined here in green, which will have the lot area of about 2.5 acres. The severed portion, which is labeled as Part 1, will be added to the blue part, which is the benefiting lands, and it will bring the total up to 5,861 square meters. To give you an overview of the subject lands, so this is the severed portion looking east, and this is the severed portion looking towards the benefiting land. And again, a view of that severed portion. So the severed portion looking west, standing towards the point of the retained lands, looking towards the severed portion. And again, there's the severed portion and the benefiting lands, and you can see the cottage on the benefiting lands. This is to the bay, and looking south towards the retained parcel. This is the cottage that is on the retained lands. And then another view of the retained lands. And the dock that is on the retained lands. This is on the southwest portion. So a consent may be permitted for lot boundary adjustments, looking to enlarge, so they're looking to enlarge the benefiting lands at 6184 Go Home Lake Shore. There will be no new lot created. Both of the lots exceed the minimum required lot frontage, which is 60 meters. The benefiting land, I believe, has over 120 meters, as well as so does the severed lands, with the addition to the benefiting lands. So the consent application is in keeping with the character of the surrounding areas, as the lot sizes are generally larger and irregular in shape, and staff support the lot boundary adjustment. The applicants are here if you have any questions for them, if you have any questions for myself.
Thank you, Dana. Is the applicant here today, or his agent? Would you please come up and identify yourself at the mic?
My partner is here as well, Jamie Knight. I am Beth, so I'm part of hearing. So I give permission so he can help me defend.
By all means.
Sorry.
Certainly.
I didn't make a question.
There wasn't a question. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Would you mind coming up and identifying yourself at the mic, please, both of you? Yeah, there's a little button on there. Victoria will do that. Is there anything that you'd like to add to what the planner has told us so far?
No, they're both of my properties, and so making the split, it was to make the both properties even. And for the
I'm
septic.
sorry, would you mind giving us your name and your address, please?
My name is Alexandra Radonich, and the address, very good one. I just say go home lake.
Okay, that's good. All right, so there, very good. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none.
Jamie Knight is my partner. We've been together for a long time, and we're in this property together, and we both made decisions on the property. So he's the one who was pretty much doing the most of the property, and I'm just the one who cooks everything for everybody.
Okay.
Sorry, so if any questions or anything like that, I'm not familiar with the construction site or anything. He knows all that kind of stuff. I just came and brought coffees and stuff.
Excellent.
So,
All right. Thank you very much. Right. Has there been any correspondence in this application?
The District of Muskoka has no objections.
Okay. Thank you. If we have some questions, we'll ask you. Seeing as there's no questions from the public, I will bring the application before the committee. Are there any questions and concerns from the members of the committee? Member Cooper, any questions?
Actually, I do. How did you know?
Surprisingly.
Intuition.
You're a very clever fellow. Just a quick question. Lot creation in Go Home Lake requires how much land? You probably told us, but I may have missed it.
Through you, Chair Hill, the minimum required lot size is 4,000 square meters.
4,000 minimum for a new lot, is that correct?
For a new lot, yes.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Cooper? Member Cooper? That's it? Nothing, Mr. Matthews? Any questions, Member Ferguson?
No, I think it's a very straightforward application that I can support.
Thank you. Member Wojcik?
Yeah, my question is to planning. On the lot that is you refer to it as part one with the existing cottage on it. Obviously that picture was taken some time ago and we weren't able to get up and see it because of the conditions. I'm wondering, have you visited this lot lately? And if you have, has there been any additions, decks, additional buildings, docks, anything else been built on this property since the time of this picture?
So through you, Chair Hill, the cottage is actually on the benefiting lands, which is outlined here in blue. Part one is the severed portion that's being added. There's no structures on it. There was an existing septic system that was decommissioned and a new system was installed solely on the blue portion, the benefiting lands. As far as I'm aware, no new buildings have been constructed prior to what was already had a permit back at the time.
Okay, we're referring to the old existing cottage, I believe, not the newer log cottage that is also shown here.
The old, or the cottage on the retained lands is on part two wholly.
Part two. Well, perhaps we could ask the applicant, if you could bring up that picture of the old cottage. That one there. Is that the current state that that building is in today, or has there been modifications or anything added?
There's been some renovations, yes.
There has been renovations? Has there been decks and things like that added?
There's a deck on the front, yes.
Okay. So coming back to you, I'm just wondering, if we haven't been out there since that time, and we weren't aware of the decks, are we sure that the lot coverage of this newly created smaller lot is acceptable? It falls within the parameters?
Through your Chair Hill, they're not creating any new lots. They're doing a lot addition, so
But
they're enlarging the lot.
They're decreasing the size of the one lot. I'm just wondering if the percentage of lot coverage is still in order.
If they've only added a deck, my guess is they will be under lot coverage. They're about 2.5 acres for the property with just the small cottage on it.
Thank you.
Member Caddo, is there any questions or comments that you'd like to make? Okay. And I ask in general, does anyone else wish to comment on this before I read the motion? Okay. And I will read the motion. It is moved and seconded, and be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves a consent application B19-02 to facilitate a lot boundary adjustment. The severed lands comprised of 1,750 square meters or 0.04 acres are proposed to be added to the benefiting lands, bringing the total lot area to 5,861 square meters or 1.4 acres. The retained lot will have a lot area of 10,235.4 square meters, which is 2.5 acres, for 6198 Go Home Lake Shore, subject to the following. That deeds for the lot addition are submitted to the Secretary Treasurer along with a registered copy of the survey plan. That section 50 subsection 3 of the Planning Act is applied to all future transactions involving the subject lands. 3, that a complete set of digital drawing files for the reference plan be provided to the Township of Georgian Bay. And 4, the confirmation that the severed and benefiting lands or lots are not or deemed not to be a lot in a plan of subdivision. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Our next application is A18-46 for 1200 Haskets Road. To the planner, please.
Next minor variance application that you have in front of you is to permit a decrease in the minimum required front yard setback where 20 meters is required to 5 meters, to permit a decrease in the minimum required side yard setback where 5 meters is required to 1.6 meters at the closest point, and to permit an increase in the maximum permitted width of a dwelling from 25% or 11.7 meters of lot frontage to 28.8% or 13.5 meters of lot frontage in order to facilitate the construction of a sunroom within the 6 Mile Lake residential zone. Just to give you an overview of where the subject property is, it's identified on the screen in black. It is zoned 6 Mile Lake residential, and it is within the 6 Mile Lake inland waterfront community and waterfront within the district official plan. An environmental impact study was submitted with the application, and it came back positively. You can see the existing property located here in red. To the north of it is crown land between it. And then there is a small portion of road allowance here, which is owned by the applicant. On the screen is the subject survey. The existing cottage is identified in yellow with a deck along the front, and the proposed addition is shown in red. So the closest point currently to the high water mark that comes in along in front of that crown land is 7.8 meters, and they're proposing to go to 5 meters. The minimum required side yard setback is 5 meters. It's currently 5.23 meters, and through this addition, the closest point will become 1.6 meters. To give you some perspective on the subject lands, this is standing near the road looking towards the subject lands, and you can see the existing cottage. This is a view to the north, and the sunroom will be on the left, which is on the west side of the existing dwelling, in the location of this existing deck. This is looking to the east, and as you can see, there's steep topography located on the eastern side of the lands. This is where the subject sunroom will be proposed. It will stick out about a meter and a half past the existing porch, or deck, sorry. And no vegetation will need to be removed in order to construct the sunroom. To give you an idea of the existing shoreline vegetation, and there has been an area in this location that has been identified by the environmentalist for some replanting. This is a view of the existing cottage. And this is the location of the proposed sunroom. and the property line. This is standing behind that existing vegetation, looking towards the sunroom. And the existing shoreline development. A view out into 6 Mile Lake. And a view of the existing cottage. So this is what the proposed sunroom is proposed to look like. So as you can see, it is identified here on the screen. You can see the floor plan of the existing cottage. It's 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, with the proposed sunroom here on the right of the screen. So the intent of the front yard setback is to maintain the character of the area and to provide an area for vegetation between development and the shoreline. The intent of the side yard setback is to ensure buildings are appropriately set back from one another and to maintain privacy between neighbors. The intent of the dwelling width is to limit visual impact of built form from the waterfront and ensure the aesthetic quality and natural heritage of the waterfront community is protected, and to create a balance between built form and the shoreline frontage. The proposed variance would meet the intent of the width, front yard setback, and side yard setback requirements. The building size is consistent with the development of the neighboring properties, and there's an appropriate balance between the development and the natural vegetation on the property of the shoreline. And through site plan control, the existing vegetation can be maintained, as well as the additional plantings that have been outlined in the environmental impact study. The abutting property in the area of the reduced side yard setback is Crown land, and there is a river or a stream that flows through there. And on the adjacent to that, there is a road allowance, which is owned by the applicant. There won't be any visual impact to the neighboring property or reduce their privacy or enjoyment of the waterfront area. The existing cottage was built in 1956, and the narrow lot restricts the development envelope. Staff believe the application meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act and are in support of the application. And the owner is present if you have any questions for themselves or if you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Dana. Have we had any correspondence on this application?
No correspondence was received.
I see the applicant is present, I assume. Could you give us your name and address, please?
Andre Beth and 1200 Ascot Drive in 6 Mile Lake.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to the comments that our planner presented so far?
The only thing I will reiterate from the presentation is because it's a broken lot, the land is separated by the crown land between the place where I want to have a porch and the next neighbor. So there is a lot of space. I consider both part of the lots.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public meeting and bring the application before the committee. And Mr. Caddo, do you have any comments or questions relative to the application? Member Bocek?
Yeah, I'm just, in the front yard setback where 20 meters is required and they're reducing it to 5 meters, the addition, the sunroom is going on the side of the building. I'm just unsure why the decrease in the front yard setback if the infringement is on the side yard setback.
Oh, through you, Chair Hill, the front yard does encroach up into that area where it is the crown land. So we're just recognizing that it's going to that 5 meter setback. Currently it's, you can see here on the screen, it is 7.8 meters. The shoreline immediately in front of the property, it's 12 meters, and that setback will be maintained and exceeded. But since the high water mark comes in along that crown land, we're just recognizing that it is going to that 5 meter setback.
Thank you.
Member Ferguson, any questions?
No, actually, having inspected the property, I think that it makes perfect sense, and I'm in favor of the application.
Member Matthews?
Thank you. One quick one for my own clarity. I did visit the site, but Dana, you talked about the side yard setback. I think you said it's 5 meters currently and it's going to 1.6. Does the deck not count for side yard setback, the current deck the way it is? And I assume if that's the case, it's because it's below 1.2 meters?
Through your Chair Hill, that is correct. So
Okay.
a deck does have encroachment provisions. The 5-yard setbacks that I was referring to was to the dwelling wall.
So in essence, they're really only coming out about another meter or a meter and a bit beyond what the existing deck is?
Yeah, just about 1.5 meters, I believe, from the existing
Great.
deck.
Thank you.
Member Dempsey?
Just I had the same question as Mr. Bochuk, and then I think the explanation was fine. I don't have any problems.
Member Cooper?
No, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments before I read the motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll read the motion. The motion is moved and seconded. Be it reserved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A18-46 to zoning bylaw number 2014-75 for 1200 Haskets Road to permit a decrease in the minimum required front yard setback where 20 meters is required to 5 meters, and to permit a decrease in the minimum required side yard setback where 5 meters is required to 1.6 meters at the closest point. The request is also to permit the increase in the maximum permitted dwelling width from 25% to 28.8% to facilitate the construction of a porch on the side of the existing dwelling pursuant to the 6 Mile Lake Residential SR6 zone, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. B, that a site plan control approval application is submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development and vegetation protection areas, including development mitigation measures to implement the recommendations of the environmental impact study as prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions in April of 2018. In the matter prescribed by the proper policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control, and that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Our next application is A19-05 for 2 Island 1860 Georgian Bay Shore. To the planner, please.
Good morning. So additional information has been provided regarding this application, which therefore will require this application to be recirculated and a new public meeting be scheduled in front of this committee at a subsequent date. So staff is requesting that the application be deferred at this time to allow for the proper provisions to be included in the application.
Thank you, Victoria. Seeing as the planning department doesn't have the necessary information to move forward with this application, I would suspect deferral would be appropriate. Is everyone in agreement with that? Okay. Then the application is deferred, and the applicant can contact the planning department to arrange for a subsequent date.
Oh, you were okay? No comment.
Peter was asking
You had a comment, Mr. Member Cooper?
Yes, just, I understand we're asking for a deferral, but I would like to point out a couple of things about this application. Just if it is coming back, there's some concerns that I'd like to see addressed. Is that suitable to make?
Certainly, go ahead, Mr. Member Cooper.
So, it's my understanding that the Cognizine plan very clearly says that in the front yard, there are to be no hot tubs, gazebos, or saunas. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the provision in the zoning bylaw that does apply to both Cognizine and Go Home Bay is essentially certain structures are not permitted in the front yard of a property without the approval of a minor variance. So there is the ability for an applicant to come forward. It just provides the township more control over shoreline structures going up in these areas. So that is why that application has been submitted to permit that.
Right. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. So it also, in effect, if you read the official plan relating to this community, there's some verbiage that refers to the same sort of thing, shoreline vistas, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to point that out. So I'm not convinced that this is minor in nature. I was not able to visit the site because of the winter conditions, which also concerns me. There's also a letter that has come in from the community, the Cognishine Cottagers Association, which represents 2/3 of the entire community, and there's a concern about it. I also believe that, I don't know whether you have seen this, or I didn't see it in the report, maybe it's there, but I also thought, since there was an agreement about 1.5 years ago or 2 years ago on this site, that was a request that was sort of well in excess of what is allowed for the main structure. An approval was given on the condition that would be it in terms of any additional development on this property. Namely, it was a very large screened-in area. When the main structure was I think somewhere around 500 square feet greater than is allowed for a main structure, so this added to it again. And so the agreement was that there wouldn't be a second sleeping cabin built. I just want to make sure that all these things are on your sort of radar. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cooper. Okay, application A19-05 is deferred, and as I mentioned, the applicant can contact the planning department for rescheduling.
Very well. Our next, no. Our next application is A19-06 for 58 Ravine Way. To the planner, please.
Right, so our next application is for 58 Ravine Way. The applicant is proposing to increase the maximum permitted lot coverage, where 8% is permitted, to 12.1% for the whole lot, and 10.4% currently exists, in order to facilitate the construction of a detached garage within the 6 Mile Lake residential zone. So as you can see on the screen, the subject property is identified in black, and it is zone 6 Mile Lake residential within the 6 Mile Lake inland waterfront community and waterfront within the district official plan. So there was a previous minor variance in 2018 to allow for a deck in front of the cottage and to permit an increase in the maximum permitted lot coverage within 60 meters of the high water mark, as well as for the whole lot area. So just an aerial view, you can see the property located here in red. So there is significant vegetation located at the rear. So the site plan identifies the proposed detached garage location. So it is outside of the 60 meter. So on 6 Mile Lake, we measured lot coverage 2 ways. One for the lot area as a whole, and one for the lot area within 60 meters. So the application is only requesting relief to the lot area as a whole, as it is outside of that 60 meter setback from the high water mark. The proposed garage on the notice was going to be a 30 by 30 garage. They have since revised it to be 25 by 25. So it has brought the proposed lot coverage increase down from 12.9% to 12.1%. There is an existing flat area of driveway that they are proposing to utilize with the detached garage. But just to give you some visuals of the subject lands, so this is where the detached deck was proposed, and it is going to be built this summer. view to the south, and a view to the north. This is a view to the west. Another view to the south along the shoreline. So here is the proposed garage location, so you can see it staked out. So as you can see, there is this rock outcropping at the rear, which is why the applicant has since revised the size of it, because it would not fit if it was 30 feet by 30 feet. And there is one tree that will need to be removed in order to facilitate the construction. Again, that is the tree that will need to be removed. And this is the view to the neighbor. There is significant vegetation buffering the two properties. And another view looking down towards a neighboring cottage. And a view standing from they do have another detached garage on the lands, and this is standing just slightly in front of it to that proposed detached garage location. So this is the existing detached garage. They are proposing a second detached garage, and it will resemble this appearance, so construction materials, and it will look similar to what they currently have. So the intent of the maximum permitted lot coverage is to maintain a balance between natural and built form and to ensure lots are not overdeveloped. So the garage will be used for winter boat storage, personal watercraft, and other household items. So they currently store their boat off-site during the winter. However, it does not fit in the existing detached garage, so they're proposing the construction of another one and requesting that relief from lot coverage. The proposed detached garage will not be visible from the water or from the adjacent neighbor, and the adjacent neighbor has submitted a letter of support in regards to the application. There is currently site plan control on the property, and it will be amended to show the proposed detached garage if the application is approved. So staff are in the opinion that the subject application does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. The applicant is present if you have any questions for himself or if you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Dina. Madam Secretary, have we had any correspondence on this application?
One letter of support was received from Corley and Ian Anderson. One letter of opposition was received from Bill Winterhall.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Could you come forward and identify yourself, please?
Good morning. Tom Whitehead, 58 Ravine Way, 6 Mile Lake.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to the comments provided by the planner?
No, I think Dana's done a good job of outlining everything.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to have any questions or comments about this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public meeting and bring that application before the committee. Oh?
I do, yeah.
Okay, would you please identify yourself at the mic?
My name's Gregory Heising. I live at 1080 Haskett Drive, 6 Mile Lake.
Okay.
Do you have a design for this garage?
Heising, H-E-I-S-E-N.
It's spelled H-U-I-Z-I-N-G-H.
No design yet?
No design yet?
No, just...
I'm sorry, if you have a question, please address it through the chair.
My apologies. I think at this time I'll withdraw. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll close the public meeting again and bring the application before the committee. Are there any questions or comments, Member Cooper?
Yeah, I think it would be very beneficial to all of us that are considering this to see and hear. I shouldn't say see, we just received it this morning, a letter from Bill Winterholt, who is the director of planning for the 6 Mile Lake Association and also a professional planner. And I think it would be educational for us, I guess, if we could hear what he had to say.
If I may, Councillor Cooper, I did ask for input from the public, and there was no one stepped forward, so I don't think it's proper for us to subpoena him to come here.
No.
If he wishes to step forward, the opportunity.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
No?
I'm asking if his letter could be read, please. I'd like to hear what what his letter said this morning.
When did we receive that letter from Mr. Winterholt? Is it not in the correspondence?
It was sent to all of the committee members this morning. We received it sometime between 4 yesterday and 8 o'clock this morning. So I sent that to you this morning around 8:15, I think. So it should be in your emails for you to review.
Yeah. Well, I obviously haven't had an opportunity to read my email since driving here this morning. So I would suggest that, you know, there's plenty of time from the time the notification goes out to provide feedback on an application. I don't think we should stop the proceeding and read the comment that was received 45 minutes before the meeting started.
So if that, is that against the procedure, or is that just your call? Because the other option I have is I could read it myself if you like.
You have 5 minutes, so.
It won't take very long.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. I think it just would be helpful for everybody to hear the commentary. Thank you. So the letter on this one from Mr. Winterholt says, this is on Ravine Way, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
I have read the staff report dated April 12th respecting the subject application, and in my opinion, it does not give sufficient weight to the magnitude of the requested increase of lot coverage. The requested increase from allowable 8% to lot coverage to 12.9% lot coverage represents 61.2% increase. There is already a garage on the property, and I'm trying to read this word.
No justification.
And no justification is provided as to why the lot coverage should be increased to accommodate a second garage. In the circumstances, the application cannot reasonably be considered to be minor, as required in section 45-1 of the Planning Act. Accordingly, the committee should refuse or defer this variance application. I'm not able to attend on April 12th meeting, but do request that the comments in this preceding paragraph be read into the record. And that's why I'm reading it.
Okay.
Please notify me of the decision. Thank you very much. And there's the letter. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Member Cooper. Member Demke.
I don't have anything further. It is a fairly large increase, obviously. That would be a concern. I just read that myself, so I might have the same concern.
Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did visit the site. I must admit, I do have concerns about lot coverage, although where the proposed location is relatively well concealed by trees, and the property seems to be at the end of almost a dead end of a street or a road. So I guess I'm still perplexed on this one, to tell you the truth.
Okay, thank you. Member Ferguson.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Winterholt that it's a significant increase in lot coverage. On the other hand, I think that Dana did a great job outlining that it's going to be well behind one of many visuals from the lake, but still it's a large lot increase. And at the very least, I would like to see an additional clause added to the approval stating that no additional construction or additional buildings be permitted on this lot. So let's cap it here.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Any questions or comments for Member Bocek?
No questions or comments.
Any questions or comments, Member Caddo? If I could ask our planner a quick question. Member Ferguson has asked to add a condition to that application that would restrict any further development on the property. Is it acceptable to just handwrite that on the resolution or on the motion?
Through you, Chair Hill, we can't, through a resolution, prevent somebody from making a Planning Act application in the future. But since they are already over their lot coverage and they are requesting the additional lot coverage today, any future buildings or structures would have to come either to committee or council in the future for approval. I don't believe the applicant has any intent to build any further structures.
Okay, Member Cooper?
Yes, I'd just like to remind us that we just deferred an application whereby there was an agreement of sorts, and only a year and a half ago, and back it came again. So for another request, so people will come back, and we just need to be mindful of that. It may not even be this current committee of adjustment. It may be in 3 or 4 years' time that another request comes in. So it's, as I understand, it's not terribly binding. People want to apply, they apply, and often will get approval. So I think we need to remember that. Thank you.
Okay. Your point taken. Member Ferguson.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's certainly not binding. All I wanted to do was to put on the record the fact that this committee doesn't believe that any further development should take place if it's approved on the property, and that may, if it's reviewed subsequently down the road, at least there's some direction to a future committee of adjustment stating that we think this is the extent of any development.
Okay, thank you, Member Ferguson. Yes, Mr. Robinson.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, I can appreciate where committee members are coming from on this. However, what's being asked of the committee is to make a decision on this specific application, and that's what the decision needs to be reflective of. We can't surmise what might be proposed in the future. If there is a future proposal, it'll be evaluated based on the policies and regulations of the day, which might be different than the ones that exist right now. So, and the site conditions at that point in time. But it's not appropriate to add any sort of a condition that indicates this is the maximum that we will ever consider, because we don't know what the conditions might be at that point in time. So I would respectfully ask the committee to consider this application on its merits and based on the information that's before you, and make the decision accordingly. Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments before I read the motion? Very well, I'll read the motion. It's moved and seconded. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A19-06 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 for 58 Ravine Way to permit an increase in the maximum permitted lot coverage, where 8% is permitted, to 12.1%, whole lot being 10.4%. In order to facilitate the construction of a detached garage within the 6 Mile Lake residential zone, subject to the following. A, that approval to this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. That the existing site plan agreement be amended to show the proposed detached garage. And C, that the approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. A question before we call them?
I'm afraid so. I'd like to request a recorded vote, please.
Recorded votes are not applicable to the Committee of Adjustment.
Thank you. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, but just to be clear, we're not voting on a deferral here. It's a yes or no. Yes is approved and no is denied. So I will call the question then. All those in favor? And for clarity, all those opposed? The motion is defeated. Okay, our next application.
Excuse me, am I allowed any questions?
Not at this point, sir, I'm sorry. The decision's been made and the decision is final. If you speak to the planning department, they can offer you some further steps from here.
Thank you.
Our next application is A19-08 for 972 Hasketts Drive. To the planner.
All right, so our next application is for 972 Hasketts Drive. So the application is requesting the construction of a detached dwelling and a detached garage, and the following variances are requested. A minimum front yard setback of 9.4 meters, where 20 meters is required. A minimum side yard setback of 4.5 meters at the closest point, where 5 meters is required. A minimum front yard setback of 6.8 meters to the closest point to a deck, where 16 meters is required. A minimum side yard setback to a deck that is over 1.2 meters in height to 4.2 meters, where 5 meters is required. A maximum dwelling width of 49%, or 14.6 meters, where 25% is permitted, or 7.5 meters. And an increase in the maximum permitted lot coverage of 11.6 for the whole lot and 14.5% within 60 meters of the high water mark, where 8% is permitted. Just an overview of where the subject property is. You can see it on the screen in black. It is zoned 6 Mile Lake residential and is within the 6 Mile Lake inland waterfront community and waterfront within the district official plan. Subject lands is shown in red, and you can see the aerial imagery. The lot lines are off. So the existing cottage is located down here. So the existing cottage is located on the screen in yellow, as well as the existing deck, and the proposed cottage is located on the screen in red. I'm just going to go over some of the comparisons between what currently exists and what they're proposing, just to put it into perspective. So the existing deck is located here in yellow, so there is a portion at the rear, and it comes down to the front of the cottage, but it does not go along the entire wall of the cottage, and I do have site photos later on. What the applicant is requesting is to move the front wall of the cottage back, where it's currently at 6.8 meters. That setback will become the setback to an open deck, and the dwelling wall will have a setback of 9.4 meters. So it will be moving back 2.6 meters, that dwelling wall. The existing dwelling wall will then become an open deck along the front of the cottage. As you can see, it has an existing side yard setback of 4.5 meters, and the applicant is proposing to maintain that setback with the new proposed cottage. The rear point of the cottage will meet the minimum required of 5 meters, sorry. It's 5.4 meters. And as you can see, the existing dwelling width is located here in yellow. And the dwelling width currently is 13.4 meters, which is 46%, and they are requesting 14.6 meters, or 49%, which is a difference of 1.2 meters. So currently, the cottage is the main structure, and they do have some existing sheds, which will be removed. So overall, the proposed development is for a detached garage towards the rear of the property and the construction of a new dwelling with an open deck along the front. Just to give you some site photos, this is looking from the driveway to the northeast, and you can see the stakes for the proposed garage. And this is the proposed detached garage location, so as you can see, there are the existing stakes and their existing boat trailer. This is looking from the rear stake towards the neighboring property, and the neighboring property does have a detached garage or similar structure located in a similar area. This is a view to the existing cottage and the proposed cottage. So as you can see, there is a steep hill going towards the shoreline. This is looking towards the east, so you can see the existing cottage and the cottage on the neighboring property. This is looking towards that neighbor at the north and the east side. So this will be the proposed cottage, and you can see the existing stake, so that will be the front stake of the cottage. Deck, sorry. And this is standing at that stake looking towards the water. So this is looking towards the rear of that proposed cottage, and you can see the stake there. And this is that front wall of the cottage, so as you can see, there's currently no deck. So the front of this cottage will become an open deck, and it will maintain the setback that currently exists of a dwelling wall, but pull the dwelling wall backwards and put a deck in this area. So this is a view out into 6 Mile Lake. And another view. So as you can see, the cottages across the lake are fairly open as well. And another view of the cottages across the bay. And a view to the southeast. So there is some vegetation buffering between the neighboring property. And a view to the north. So you can see the property stake there. And this is the rear of the existing cottage, so where that proposed development will take place. You can see the existing stake there, and there was another stake towards the bottom of the picture. And this is looking north. This is looking towards the neighboring property to the south, and you can see that they're developed very close to that shoreline, and you can see the steep topography of the shoreline. This is a view of the cottage in the summer of what currently exists. So again, the cottage will be pulled back, and this setback will become the setback to an open deck, with the main wall of the cottage moving back about 2.5 meters, and it will become about 1.2 meters wider than what currently exists. And this is the rear of the existing cottage in the summertime. So just to put it in perspective, what they are proposing, this is what the front elevation will look like. And it does comply with the height requirements. It's about 5.5 meters that they're proposing, where they're permitted 8. And the side views and the rear. This is the main floor plan. And there will be a partial loft. So it won't be the entire area of the main floor. It will be 400 square feet, whereas the main floor is about 1,200 or so. This is the proposed garage. So the intent of the maximum permitted width is to reduce visual impact and create a relationship between shoreline and the dwelling. So this is a narrow lot which restricts the width that they are permitted as of right. The intent of the front yard setback is to maintain a balance between built and natural form and ensure structures are adequately set back from the shoreline and to maintain the integrity of the waterfront community. The intent of the lot coverage is to ensure that lots are not overdeveloped and natural areas are maintained, and they maintain a balance between built and natural form on the lot. The intent of the side yard setback is to ensure buildings are appropriately set back from one another and to maintain the privacy between neighbors. So the subject application is utilizing the existing development area. They are pulling the cottage back and adding a loft and adding the addition to the rear of the existing cottage. The existing side yard setback will be maintained and they will not encroach further into it. The rear of the cottage will actually be getting farther away from where it currently is. The topography of the lands is restrictive for development, and when comparing what is existing and what is proposed, the dwelling is larger in gross floor area, but most of the addition will be at the back, as well as adding a loft. The height currently is 4.3 meters, and they are proposing 5.5 meters, which is an increase in 1.2 meters. Width is only getting 1.2 meters greater than what currently exists. The lot coverage is increasing mainly through the addition of the garage at the rear of the property, and it will have minimal visibility to the water and to the neighboring due to the vegetation, as well as the topography on the lot. The proposed development is in keeping with the development in the area, as a visual impact has already been established. The original cottage was built in 1954. The width is similar to what currently exists, and the additional gross floor area is proposed at the rear and in a loft. So through site plan control, there is an opportunity to revegetate that shoreline where possible. So as you saw from the summer photos, it is mainly comprised of bedrock. So the application can be deemed minor, as there is a limited development envelope on the subject lands. The application meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and staff recommend the application be approved. The owners are present if you have any questions for themselves or if you have any questions for me.
Pardon me. Thank you, Dana. Madam Secretary, do you have any correspondence on this application?
No correspondence was received.
Okay. Is the applicant present? And would you like to add any comment to what the planner has submitted? Yep. Somewhere there's a button that you can push. There you go. Okay, could I have your name and address, please?
Robin Tony Jackledge, 972 Haskett Drive.
And your assistant?
Rob Jackledge, 972 Haskett Drive.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And did you have some comments you'd like to add to what Dana presented?
It isn't, we tried to patch the cottage for a long time. We didn't really want to take it down. We've really looked at the structure, and we've been fighting decay and rot and things like that. So
It would have cost us substantially more to fix the cottage as it is, to try to correct some of the problems that we're having right now.
And I think we hope to really keep the culture of 6 Mile Lake. We've tried to keep the design to look single structure from the front. You can see that we really do stick out right now. This outside skin of the cottage is yellow. So we hope to blend in with the environment a little more so that we're not quite as noticeable moving forward.
Okay. Are there any members of the public, any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public session and bring the application before the committee. Member Caddo, do you have any questions or comments?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Member Bocek, any questions or comments?
No.
Okay. Member Ferguson, do you have any questions or comments?
If you would to go back to showing where the lot is.
Survey?
No, yeah. Well, not the survey, just that you showed all the various lots going up the lake and where this one was located, the location.
Oh, the location map?
Yeah, there. You'll notice that in this area of 6 Mile Lake, there are a large number of undersized lots. And this is a prime example. You have a lot that's, what, 100 feet wide?
Yes.
And then to compound that, you have that steep rock slope. So trying to site a cottage on it is really difficult. And because you only have 100 feet, then you need a variance for some width because you want exposure right onto the lake, not sideways. So it's really kind of the perfect storm. So I certainly appreciate what you're doing here and all the work you put into it. But there are some concerns that because of these 100-foot lots, that there are lots of variances being requested, and it is having, I think, a tremendous visual impact from the water because the cottages are becoming very close together. So it's just something you want to be cognizant of, that if you can do anything to try and buffer that or change some colors, it should be done because it's beginning to, as these smaller lots are being redeveloped and cottage widths are expanding, it's becoming like a residential street the way some of them are jammed together. And I notice you're very close to your neighbor looking at the lake on the right. Anyway, that's my only comment.
Great. Thank you, Member Ferguson. Member Matthews, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did visit the site, and I certainly can appreciate your restriction that you have on the lot because of the, I think Dana said it was mildly sloped. I was exhausted walking down the steps and I wasn't carrying groceries down there, so I can appreciate your scenario. I think that in essence you're really not going any wider than what's there. You're trying to keep the height down. And I think to Member Ferguson's with something less than bright yellow, it probably won't stand out quite as much. I'd also like to comment or thank you for marking out the although it was very sophisticated marking with a brick and a stick.
Yeah, I'm very sorry.
But it did give me at least an opportunity to get a sense of what you were trying to do. So I would support this application.
Thank you, Member Matthews. Member Demke.
Yes, I also visited the site, had fun going up and down the stairs. But just referring to what you were trying to do, what you'd said, it really impresses me, the fact of the color, trying to keep it, in conjunction with the way the lake is. So I really appreciate that. I would be in support.
Member Cooper?
Thank you very much, and I have to say that I'm certainly very interested in hearing the comments from my fellow committee members, and I find those helpful, and it sounds like it's a very challenging site. I have not visited the site. I missed the stairs, I'm afraid, but I can see from the information here that while there's a significant difference from a building that, from the numbers that I see here, a building that is compliant in many ways now to something that's not as compliant. Having said that, I can understand the desire of the applicant to put something new in. The only thing I would ask is, I support this. One thing I would like to see, which I find a bit would be more helpful, is that the statistics that you put in this application, for example, on the lot coverage, it says that there's a 3.6% difference on in terms of the maximum lot coverage, and it also says there's a 6.5% difference within 60 meters. And if you do the mathematics, however, the difference between 8 and 11.6 and 8 and 14.5 is in fact 45% and 81%. So it depends on how you do your math. And I would just suggest to you that we just heard from a planner on 6 Mile Lake that has been planning all his life and in the city of Brampton, and he uses that type of statistic. So there's more than one way to do your math. That's my only point, but I do support what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cooper. Are there any other questions or comments before I read the motion? Yes, Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Dana, essentially it's the garage that's pushing the excess of lot coverage. Is that correct?
Yes, through your chair, Hill. So I did do a calculation if the garage wasn't there. I just have to. So the lot coverage, just the cottage and deck, would be 8.8% for the whole lot and 10.8% within 60 meters. So the majority of that additional lot coverage is through that garage.
Garage,
Yeah.
right, which is removed from the view from the canoe.
Yes, it will be towards the rear.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions or comments, I'll read the motion. The motion is moved and seconded. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A19-08 to zoning bylaw number 2014-75 for 972 Haskets Drive to permit the construction of a detached dwelling with a front yard setback of 9.4 meters where 20 meters is required, a side yard setback of 4.5 meters where 5 meters is required, a front yard setback of 6.8 meters to a deck where 16 meters is required, a side yard setback of 4.2 meters to a deck that is greater than 1.2 meters in height where 5 meters is required, a dwelling width of 48.9%, 14.6 meters, where a maximum of 25% or 7.5 meters is permitted, and a lot coverage of 11.6% whole lot and 14.5% within 60 meters of the high water mark, where a maximum of 8% is permitted, pursuant to the 6 Mile Lake residential zone, subject to the following. Pardon me. That approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject, site plan, extent, location, and scale, and use contemplated in the application. That a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development, existing vegetation, protection areas, and the additional plantings in the front yard in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control, and that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Our next application is application number A19-09 for 742 Kings Farm Road. To the planner, please.
Our next application was submitted by Deborah Heiser for 742 Kings Farm Road. The request is to permit the development of a screened porch to an existing dwelling pursuant to the Shoreline Residential Type 1 SR1 zone with a minimum side yard setback of 1.5 meters where 5 meters is required and a maximum lot coverage of total lot area of 10.8% where 10% is permitted. So here's a location map of the property. It is located on Little Go Home Bay. In the official plan, it is currently designated waterfront residential. And in the zoning bylaw, again, it is currently zoned shoreline residential type 1. Here is an aerial photo of the property. Existing structures on the property include a single detached dwelling, a detached garage that is currently under construction to the rear of the dwelling, and a U-shaped dock. There is vegetation throughout the site with sporadic vegetation all along the shoreline as well, which we will see in some photos coming forward. So essentially, the request of this application is to build a screened porch over a portion of an existing deck that is on the dwelling. The porch is not going any closer to the water than what exists of the dwelling. And so again, the specific provisions of this application is to permit that side yard setback of 1.5 and to recognize a total lot coverage of 10.8%. So again, currently the property is allowed 10% and they're asking for 10.8%, and 5% is required and they're asking 1.5. And just to note as well, there's approximately 10 meters of separation between the proposed corner of the new dwelling that would be pushed out to here with the screened-in porch from the adjacent dwelling to the north. So here are some elevations. So this is what is existing here. As you can see, the deck is existing there, and they're essentially asking to build the screened-in porch out to the edge of that deck. Some photos. Here is the rear of the cottage, and just a note, they are just putting new siding on the cottage. It is the same cottage that has been there for quite some time. Here we are looking at the existing deck, and as you can see, the orange rope, the applicants did rope off the extent of the proposed screened-in porch. So this is looking towards the shoreline here from the back of the cottage. And again, here is looking from the corner of the deck to the shoreline and the existing vegetation that is there. So here we're looking at the side of the cottage where the proposed screen-in porch is proposed. Again, the extent is shown here in the orange tape. Here's a view from the dock towards the water. Again, just some other views of where the proposed porch is located, and again, its separation and the vegetation that does exist between them and the adjacent landowner. And again, the extent of the screened-in porch. And so here's that corner that I was speaking of, and the separation that does exist between the adjacent neighbor and them is approximately 10 meters, so a reasonable separation does exist. So the purpose of the minimum side yard setback provision in the zoning bylaw is to ensure adequate separation between structures on adjacent properties and to ensure that there's appropriate access that is provided between the front and rear of properties for landowners. So the proposed location of the screen-in porch is situated on top of a deck that is already existing. Adequate separation of approximately 10 meters does exist. And again, due to the fact that there is already that access that is provided through the side yard with the existing deck there, the addition of the screen-in porch is not anticipated to add any issues in regards to accessing the front and rear of the property. The purpose of the maximum lot coverage provision is to restrict overdevelopment of a property by controlling the ratio of built form to natural state. The proposed screen-in porch would require a maximum lot coverage of 10.8%. Given that the porch is proposed on top of an existing deck, additional visual impact for the screened-in porch is anticipated to be minimal from the water, given the existing vegetation, and as well from the adjacent landowner. The orientation of the dwelling, as well as the large side yard setback to the south property line, provide for a balance of built form from the water, and that is not anticipated to change from this application. So in consideration of these matters, the application for minor variance is deemed minor from staff, as it does not protrude closer towards the water and is not considered overdevelopment of the subject lands and does meet the 4 tests. Staff are in support of this application, and if you have any questions for myself, and I believe the applicant is here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Did we have any correspondence on this application?
No correspondence was received.
Is the applicant present and almost not? And would you please identify yourself?
John Heiser, 742 Kings Farm Road.
And do you have anything to add to Victoria's presentation, Mr. Heiser?
We're just looking forward to being able to sit out one evening and not being eaten alive by mosquitoes.
Are there any members of the public that wish to who have questions or comments for this application? Very well, seeing none, I will bring the application before the committee. And Member Caddo, do you have any questions or concerns? No questions. Member Bocek?
Just wondering if we received any correspondence on this file?
No correspondence was received.
I have no.
Member Ferguson?
No issues.
Member Matthews?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One quick one. I guess you talk about the side yard setback, Victoria. Does the deck currently not qualify for that side yard setback? Because there's really no, we're not getting any closer to the lot line with the screened-in porch should it be approved.
So through you, Mr. Chair, yes, the deck is existing to that setback. Decks do have additional encroachment allowances in the zoning bylaw. However, when this deck was built, it was previous to the zoning bylaw. So what is there is legally existing. So that's why it still needs to be recognized through this application. But you are correct. They're not going any further than the deck. That line essentially is there. They're just looking to build on top of it. But because of that, we do still need to recognize it because decks have different setbacks than structures. Yeah, okay. Different encroachments, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And also thank you for the clarity, because when I first saw it with the white tieback, I thought, have we got a build before permission sort of scenario here, but that's not the case at all, so thank you.
Member Debque?
Thank you. Yes, I visited the site too. I liked the way it's all laid out, and I had the same question as Member Matthews, that I couldn't comprehend how the setback changes, but that answered that. Looks very clean. I thought it was yourself, the owner, when I got there, because there was a fellow working there, but he was working on the garage. But everything was fine. Thank you. I'd support this.
Member Cooper?
First of all, to the applicant, I see that you've got your chair set up already for your screened-in verandas. I don't have any issues with this. I just had a quick question, just to remind me in terms of location, because there are several go-home bays and lakes and so forth, and this is not go-home bay for sure. It doesn't seem to be go-home lake. Is Little Go-Home Bay, and is Little Go-Home Bay not on 6 Mile Lake, or is it on Gloucester Pool? Is it Gloucester Pool? Have I got that right?
Yep. Through you, Mr. Chair, you are correct. It is not on 6 Mile Lake. It is 6 Mile Lake would be to the northeast of this location. It is located on the Trent Severn, so that's why that 10% applies.
I'm just looking at this, the sort of 10,000-foot story. So 6 Mile Lake, Gloucester Pool, Little Lake, and Severn River are all on the same water level, correct?
No. Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe so.
I can help out.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Gloucester Pool, Little Lake are all on the same water level, but the 6 Mile Lake is above it. There's White's Falls in between the two.
That would be a navigational problem, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or concerns on this application? Seeing none, I will read the motion. The motion is moved and seconded. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A1909 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 for 742 Kings Farm Road to permit the development of a screen porch to an existing dwelling pursuant to shoreline residential type 1 zone with a minimum side yard setback of 1.5 meters where 5 meters is required and a maximum lot coverage of 10.8% where 10% is permitted, subject to the following. That approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. B, that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development, existing vegetation protection areas, and additional plantings in the front yard in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And C, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Our next application is A19-10 for 165 Big Rock Road. To the planner, please.
Our next application was submitted by John and Carol Paul for 165 Big Rock Road, which is located on 6 Mile Lake. So this application requests to permit the development of a new dwelling and garage pursuant to the 6 Mile Lake residential zone with a maximum gross floor area of 259 square meters, where a maximum of 190 square meters is permitted, a minimum front yard setback to a dwelling of 17 meters, where a minimum of 20 meters is required, a minimum front yard setback to a deck of 15 meters, where a minimum of 16 meters is required, a maximum dwelling width of 35% of lot frontage, where 25% of lot frontage is permitted, a maximum lot coverage of 13.5%, where a maximum of 8% is permitted, a minimum setback of an accessory structure to a main dwelling of 4.3 meters, where 5 meters is required, and a maximum floor area of a sleeping cabin of 72.5 square meters, where a maximum of 56 square meters is permitted. I know that was a mouthful, but we'll walk through it as we go along. So here is a location map of the subject lands on 6 Mile Lake, here in the center, and it's off of Big Rock Road, just south of Haskett's Drive. In the official plan, the subject lands are currently designated residential within the 6 Mile Lake Inland Waterfront Community and currently zoned 6 Mile Lake Residential SR6. Existing structures on the property include 2 single detached dwellings, a covered boat port, and 2 sheds. And so here we have the overview of the site plan. So again, the existing conditions of this property is 2 dwellings. The hatched area here is the existing footprint of the main dwelling, as well as a secondary dwelling here. It is noted as a sleeping cabin, but it has been determined that there is a kitchen in this facility legally, so it is also considered a dwelling at this time. So the proposal is to redevelop the main cottage in the dark black outline here, the conversion of the second main dwelling into a sleeping cabin, so the removal of the kitchen facilities, and also a future proposed garage to the rear. So here are some proposed elevations of the proposed main dwelling. Here are some site photos. So here we are in the rear of the property looking towards the shoreline. So you can see the main cottage is over here to the left, one of the accessory sheds here in the middle, and then that secondary dwelling that is to the right, but again, that is being proposed to be converted to a sleeping cabin, this structure right here. Here we have to the rear of the main dwelling, so this area here is where the majority of the proposed redevelopment of the main structure is going to occur, and of course this shed will be taken down. This is the front of the second dwelling. Again, this is to be converted to a sleeping cabin. And here we're looking from the shoreline towards the property, so you can see the main dwelling on the right, the secondary dwelling on the left, again proposed to be converted to a sleeping cabin. So this is the structure to the right that is proposed to be redeveloped at this time. And this is the rear of the main dwelling. So this is the majority of the area that is proposed to be redeveloped. So staff recommends that the application be deferred at this time, as staff wish to view the property in better conditions and also from the water. Also, there may be an opportunity for further consultation with the applicant to better bring the application into conformity with the zoning bylaw. If you have any questions for myself or the applicant's agents are here as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Have there been any correspondence on this application?
One letter of opposition was received from Bill Winterhalt.
Is the applicant present? Come forward, please, and identify yourself.
Carol and John Paul, 165 Big Rock Road.
I'm sorry, would you mind speaking up a little bit? We didn't get that.
Carol and John Paul, 165 Big Rock Road.
Thank you.
Also, we're their agents, Alex McConney, Box 240 or Medante.
I'm sorry, would you mind spelling your last name, please?
MCCONNEY.
Okay.
And Jason Stradiotto, Avanti Engineering, agent as well. We're both listed as agents. Alex is actually a staff member of Avanti, which has sort of intimate knowledge of the drawings and whatnot. That's why.
Could you spell your last name, Jason, please?
STRADIOTTO.
Thank you. So do you have something to add to the comments from the planner?
Just to add to Victoria, some of the things we're going in for minor variance for is due to existing conditions, such as the setbacks to the sleeping cabin, where they're too existing right now is exactly what we're applying for at 4.3 meters. It's just since it's existing, we have to apply in the minor as well. Same as the area of the currently second dwelling to be sleeping cabin is staying the exact same. We were originally proposing to do no work to the cabin, but Victoria has advised us that we will have to remove the kitchen facilities if we're going to deem it as a sleeping cabin instead of a dwelling. Our client originally, when that cabin, that's the original cabin from the family's cottage, and they did get proper approvals to build the second dwelling and have two dwellings on the property about 35 years ago. And since the zoning bylaw has changed, they no longer can, so that's why we're trying to keep it and turn it into a sleeping cabin without losing that original cabin of the property that the family had. Also, for our front yard setbacks, we're trying to reduce it from the original ones. As you can see, the shaded area is the original dwelling, but also in front of that is our original deck. We're trying to pull that deck back farther from the lake, as well as the front of the original cottage. So we're improving the front yard setbacks for both the deck and the dwelling to try and get it away from the water as much as possible. A reason why we couldn't go back even further is because of the hydro lines in the back. We have to maintain a 4-meter clearance from there. So we didn't want to get too close also because there's going to be some blasting required. So we didn't want to be right on that line because it's also not an actual easement noted by Hydro 1. So I wanted to stay as far away from there, at least another meter from where Hydro requires. Going back to the front of the cottage quickly, the reason we also stopped there is because there's a big rock that the cottage is in front of, and we actually tried to place the deck right on top of that so that all of the new structure will not be hanging down in front of it other than the stairs, just to get off the deck to go to the water. just so you don't see as much actual building components, you see more natural landscape. You don't see big, tall 6x6s in front of, right on, like from the shoreline or anything like that. You just see the natural rock. And our client is also looking to make this their full-time home, so that's why the dwelling is a little bit bigger than a typical cottage. The current one is only a 3-season cottage with some really small bedrooms, so since they want to retire up here and move here full-time, they wanted to have a little bit more space in the 4-season room, or in the 4 Seasons building, so they can host family during the winter months, so we can fit a couple, fit 4 nice sized bedrooms in there, just so that their kids can come up with their grandkids and in the wintertime, and nobody really can stay in the additional sleeping cabin since it's only a 3-season building. Other than that, I think that's about it.
Thank you very much for those comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public session and bring this before the committee. And just before we entertain some questions, I would ask the planner, I noticed that there is a note for, or request for deferral on this application. Could you tell us the reason for that, please?
Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct. Staff, and again, kind of going further to what the applicant's comments are, staff would like to see this property in better weather, essentially, to be able to see all these natural features that are being spoken of, especially from the water as well, given the existing amount of structures along the visible shoreline, as well as we think that there may be opportunity for further consultation with the applicant to further bring it into a bit more conformity. But again, we would just like some more time for that to happen. That is staff's request.
Okay. Thank you very much, and certainly thank you for that additional information. I have a sense then from the comments of our planner that the planning department doesn't have sufficient information to move forward with this application. Do I get the feeling from the committee as well that deferral is appropriate for this? Yes, a comment, Mr. Demke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I visited the site, and I understand I was going to ask some questions, especially the hydro line. I'm a pretty short guy, and I was on top of that. I almost thought I could touch it. So that was a question. The other was around where it looks like the deck is going to be. It's almost right against that berm. I assume that's just a big berm right in front, towards the hydro line. It looked like, if you look at the that one there.
At the back, it's actually a rock. So our proposed dwelling is just in front of it. So that rock will probably require a little bit of blasting on the one side, just for the actual construction purposes. But it's almost going to end up being retaining wall, almost. But it's going to be retaining itself, not dirt. But a little bit will have to be blasted because it's almost all rock there. So
yeah, no, that answers the question, because I wondered how. My guess was how you'd even get off to anything, but that's I'm okay with that. The other was where the proposed garage is. There's got to be quite a few trees, I guess, taken out.
Yeah, there are a few trees because they are fairly treed in between the dwelling and the road.
Yeah.
So that was really the only feasible spot we could fit one, just because they are looking to be there for the winter. They want to have a snow blower and stuff like that, and an outdoor storage area and a car for the winter months. They could store one in there. So
yeah, it looked like the right place for the garage, but I on the trees, some of the trees are some says ironwood markers. I have no idea what that means. There's a stamp right on them.
My late father-in-law was a forester, and one of his projects was to survey our property and identify the species of all of our trees. So that's not an official.
No, that's fine. I just didn't know if it meant anything, but other than that, I'm okay. Thank you.
Member Cooper?
You have ironwood on your property?
According to my father-in-law.
Excellent. It's That's very interesting, thank you. And no, I just had I guess a few suggestions in terms of planning. First of all, I wanted to compliment you on asking for a deferral on this so that the site can be seen. I think that's critical at this time of year, and it applies to a lot of applications. So thank you for that. And I would also suggest that the letter that came in from the 6 Mile Lake Association and planner Bill Winterholt be viewed and considered, because there's some significant points being raised there. And finally, just in quick math again, I find that the lot coverage is now 59% greater than what is allowed. The particular concern for me isn't so much the size of the main structure. It is 73% greater than allowed, but I am concerned about the sleeping cabin. I think generally speaking, we've tried very hard in this township to keep our sleeping cabins to 600 square feet or less. So I realize this is an existing structure, but I encourage the applicant and the planning department to give that very careful consideration, because it is a bit of a line in the sand, and it's one line that I follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to confirm the comments from Bill Winterhall don't indicate that he's representing the 6 Mile Lake Association. They just indicate that there is personal comments.
Okay, Member Bocek.
My question is to Victoria. If we agree to a deferral, do you think, being that the building envelope in this part of the world is quite small, and I'm sure these folks would like to get under construction, do you think there's a possibility of coming back next month to the committee, or are you looking at a substantially longer time?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would absolutely hope that we can bring this back at the next meeting to committee with a recommendation. Again, I just feel that there is a little bit more that needs to be discussed. Again, speaking to the proposed sleeping cabin, as well as the day that I personally went out on site for my site visit. It hadn't been staked out yet. It has since been staked out. However, I haven't been able to see that yet, as well as there was still some significant snow cover, and I know that the weather is a lot better already. So I think if I'm able to get out there within the next week or so, I don't see a problem with me bringing it back at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just a closing comment. I did see the site myself, and I share that concern about the size of that bunkie, and where before it was used as a cabin with a kitchen and everything else, the remaining square footage that it occupies is pretty large. And is there not a restriction on the maximum size of a bunkie that you can have on that property?
Mr. Chair, yes, 56 square meters is the maximum in the zoning bylaw for a sleeping cabin, and there is a provision in this application to ask for the increase of that, but again, that is one thing that staff would like to further discuss with the applicant.
That's great. I think that would be a good discussion. So, was there a comment, Member Ferguson?
Just that I certainly support the comments made by Councillor Cooper, in that there are some significant variations to what's permitted in this application, and I hope that there could be increased dialogue before it comes back to us.
Okay, then I get the sense then that the committee is in favor of a deferral on this application. So I will hereby mark that as deferred. And you can contact the planning department for information about it being rescheduled. We had a little bit of discussion, and that's it. So very well. Thank you very much. And our next application is A18-44 for Canizares. Yeah, this particular application is not subject to a public meeting as it was brought before a committee in the past. So I will close the public meeting and bring that application before the committee. And, I'm sorry, to the planner, are there any additional information you could add us? And
Right, through you, Chair Hill, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a refresher, just so it's fresh in everyone's mind, on what the applicant is requesting. So it was heard at a previous public meeting. So at that time, the property was zoned residential type 1, which only permitted a 10% lot coverage. Since then, we have done the housekeeping update to bring the subject lands into the proper zoning of the, sorry, it was zoned R4. Now we're going to R1. Yes, sorry, got those backwards. Is R4? What did I write? R1. Sorry, typo on this slide. That was what threw me off. It was zoned R1, which allowed the 10% lot coverage when it should have been zoned R4. So just ignore the typo on the screen. So in 2007, when the services were brought into this area, the zoning was updated. However, this property got missed. So at the last meeting, we deferred it to do a housekeeping update so that we can correct the zoning issue before we brought the application forward. So at that time, they were requesting 10%. They are now requesting 10% to 31. They are now requesting 30% to 31.8%. So just to give you an overview again of what the subject, where the subject property is, it's outlined on the screen in black. So the lot widths along Beach Avenue do range from 15 to 18 meters in width, as well as some exceeding 20 meters. Yeah, so previously the property was R1, which permitted 10% lot coverage, and you can see it here on the screen in red. Through the housekeeping, we have corrected the zoning back to the R4 to allow for, as of right, 30%, and the applicant is requesting 31.8%. So again, just to give you, refresh your memory, the existing cottage is located in gray on the screen, and the proposed addition is the hatched area at the back. So the existing cottage was built in 1954 and is considered legal non-complying because of the front yard setback as well as the side yard setbacks. So the addition that they are proposing at the rear is beyond 20 meters from the high water mark, and the proposed addition complies with the minimum required side yard setbacks, which the minimum required is 2 meters, and they are proposing 2.06 or 2.1, and 2.4 meters and 2.5 meters. So the minimum required setback to the right-of-way. So Beach Avenue is public until you stop at the neighboring property, and then it turns into a legal right-of-way to get to the last 3 properties on this street. The minimum required setback to a right-of-way is 4 meters, and they are proposing 9.8 meters, which will allow for room for parking as well as parking within the garage. So again, just some photos that I had shown at the last meeting. This is the existing cottage and the area of the proposed addition. This is a view from the water. So the height will comply with the minimum required height of the bylaw, which is 7.5 meters, and they are proposing 7.4 meters. The peak will stick out slightly higher than what currently exists. And then again, the rear of the property, where the proposed addition will take place. And then just looking at that view down Beach Avenue, which becomes private starting at this neighboring lot where that silver car is. Again, just to show you the addition, which will be shown at the back. And this is the rear. So the main floor of the addition will be a garage. And then the second floor will be additional living space with bedrooms and a bathroom. The existing width of the dwelling is 11.07 meters, and the proposed width is 9 meters plus 1.5 meters for the porch. So the lot coverage currently is 21.6%, and they are proposing 31.8%, which is an increase of 1.8%. So they are permitted 337.26 square meters, and they are proposing 357.53 square meters. So they're adding an additional 20 square meters. So lot coverage is to ensure that lots are not overdeveloped and to maintain a balance between built and natural form. So the proposed addition is at the rear, and visual impact from the water has already been established by that existing deck and the existing cottage. The addition is back beyond the 20-meter setback, and all the lots along Beach Avenue are zoned residential type 4 and permit a 30% lot coverage. So any of the lots along this road can develop up to 30% if they choose. The location of the addition is generally flat with minimal vegetation that has to be removed. So the front yard setback in 9119 on our water body was 10 meters. And a deck at that time can encroach 4 meters into the required yard, which is how the deck that is along the front of the cottage got that setback of 6 meters. So there are concerns of the deck encroaching onto the neighboring lot. So the deck permit was issued in 2014, so it complied at that time. So the building department is aware of the potential encroachment, and they are going to go out to investigate on whether or not it was built as per the plans that they received the permit for or not, and whether or not the deck will need to come back to what was approved. So no permits will be issued for the proposed addition until the issues with the deck are resolved. So staff believe that the application meets the 4 tests as it is in keeping with the character of the area. All the lots in this area have the permissions to develop up to 30% if they choose. So through site plan control, we can retain the existing vegetation on the lands, as well as have additional shoreline plantings in order to mitigate some of the visual impact that currently exists. So the owner is here if you have any questions for him, even though it's not a public meeting, but if you have questions for myself, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you, Dana. Is the applicant present? Could you come forward, please, and give us your name and address for the record?
Good morning. My name is Romeo Canizares.
Okay, and do you have anything to add to the planner's comments, Mr. Canizares?
Just in regards to the encroachment of the actual deck to the neighbor, the original deck that was established on that particular spot, and that was probably 50 years ago. And what we did, we followed the same procedure where the original deck was. And in case on the front of that deck, that was where we increased towards the lake. But the side between our neighbor, that was the original deck that we followed 50 years ago from the original cottage. We haven't changed anything more than that. That was it.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't believe that's part of the application today, but it was mentioned at the previous meeting that we had, so it sounds like you'll be working with the building department to get that resolved. Any other comments you'd like to make before we bring the application before the committee? No? Did we have any correspondence since the last time on this?
We did receive correspondence since the last public meeting, and it was sent to committee members through email.
Okay. I will now bring the application before the committee. Are there any questions or comments? We'll start with Member Cooper. No questions or comments. Member Denkin?
No questions.
Any questions or comments, Member Matthews?
Just, I remember when this did come forward and we did request that the zoning get changed, which council has done, so I'm happy with that decision and I would support this now.
Member Ferguson, any questions or comments?
I would just make the same comments as Member Matthews, that we deferred this to change the zoning. It's been done, and I'm in favor of it.
Member Bocek?
No questions or comments.
Okay. And Member Caddo?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, I will read the motion. Okay. The motion is moved and seconded. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A18-44 to zoning bylaw number 2014-75 for 36 Beach Avenue to permit the increase in the maximum permitted lot coverage where 30% is permitted, 21.6 exists currently, to 31.8% in order to facilitate the construction of an addition pursuant to the residential type 4 zone, subject to the following. A, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan, extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. B, that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development, existing vegetation protection areas, and additional plantings in the front yard in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And C, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. And I'd ask the committee, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. All right, so moving down our list. That concludes the rest of it. Now what we need is a motion for minutes. Oh, very good. Okay, our second final motion, which is moved and seconded, is be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves the minutes of March 15, 2009 as amended and circulated. Were there any questions or comments about the minutes of the previous meeting? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And finally, moved and seconded, be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment does now adjourn at 10:55 until May 17th, 2019 at 0900 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? The motion is carried.
Mr. Chair, is there some papers we should be signing?
Yes.
Yes. And the decision was made to hold them all to the end rather than interrupt and, make the meeting go a little bit further,
I thought there was a change.
a little faster.
Yes, please don't be available again.
And I would comment that I like the way you're asking individual councillors now instead of significantly putting up our hands. That works well.
I have become a student of the Township of Georgian Bay procedural bylaw, Robert's Rules of Order, and the Beauvoir Canadian Rules of Order, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and
Yeah, we've all been there. Yeah. That's a long read.
well, thank you all. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You got a 5 o'clock motion today, I said, Johnny, who wants to?
I'm surprised that. 2, and then deferral 6.
So just be,
Just because you didn't want to sign this.
Okay.